Friends, today we are going to start a new module, and this is about methodology. In this lecture, we will be talking about what is methodology, what are various methods, tools and techniques of data collection that sociologists in general and population sociologists in particular employ to study social phenomena. Right in the beginning, it is important to make a distinction between methodology and methods. Not many students, at least at this level, are familiar with this difference. The term methodology refers to philosophy and logic of methods, while the term methods is used for specific tools and techniques of research. Broadly speaking, there are two methodologies in sociology, and they are called positivist and phenomenological. Actually, when sociology developed as a science by founder fathers like Comte, it started with the assumption that though the subject matter is different, but sociology is as much a science as other natural sciences, which means that the subject matter is different, but the tools and techniques of science, mathematics, experimental sciences, logic, etc., can be applied to study social phenomena. And this kind of philosophy in philosophical terms was called positivism. Comte was known as the initiator of positivist philosophy, and then Emile Durkheim and many other sociologists followed. Much of American sociology today can be called positivist. If you open an article in American Journal of Sociology or American Sociological Review, there is a very high chance that the article is based on statistical data, and sophisticated statistical techniques have been applied to analyze those data. Positivists assume that the social phenomena can be studied using tools and techniques of science. For them, objectivity and value neutrality are the hallmarks of science. So, if sociology has to become science, it must use objectivity and value neutrality. Phenomenologists, on the other hand, reject positivism and claim that human behavior is not amenable to scientific treatment. In order to understand human behavior, sociologists must study subjective meanings, and qualitative methodology is most suited for this. This was the view of Max Weber, that if you want to understand social action, it has to be understood in subjective meanings that the actors attach to their action. So, some action may be done with different subjective meanings, and with the same subjective meaning people can do different types of acts. What is of utmost importance therefore, is to understand the connection between act and subjective meanings. So, today in this lecture we will look into various aspects of positivism and phenomenology, and the specific methods that sociologists and population scientists have used in studying the various processes, trends and connections between population variables and social variables. Right in the beginning, I must say that specifically in the field of population studies, social scientists working in different fields of fertility, mortality, morbidity, in the beginning place greater importance on quantitative methods such as survey and analytical methods. I remember when I was a student of IAPS, much of demographic research was devoted to estimation of rates and ratios from incomplete data or unreliable data or from whatever little information on some demographic aspect was available from different sources. No wonder the first generation of population scientists were mathematicians and statisticians, some were economists. And one major reason was that not much was known about the demographic trends, and the present day sources of demographic data such as National Family Health Survey or sample registration scheme also did not exist. So, whatever little information on population was available from censuses that has to be analyzed using analytical methods for estimation of growth rates, birth rates, death rates. Also analytical methods were required to identify errors in census data and correct them. But gradually now there is a shift in attention to issues like AIDS, HIV AIDS. You know that HIV AIDS has become an important epidemic worldwide, and our country is not an exception to this. Of course, we are not so high in prevalence rate as some of the African countries. In some African countries, the HIV prevalence rate among people in the working ages or in reproductive ages is as high as 20%. They have a very deadly situation. Now, we are very much far behind, but the nature of HIV is such that if it is not fought timely, then India may also have severe consequences of that. And now, in this study of HIV, it is not merely rates, we have to understand behavior, meaning, we have to understand social representations of health and illness, we have to understand representations of masculinity or risk behavior, why do people indulge in risk behavior. So, there is a shift in attention to HIV AIDS epidemic, sexuality and empowerment, which has led to major changes in methodology. The reason is that researchers working on HIV AIDS have to deal not only with, as I said, estimation of incidence and prevalence rates, but they also must explore the social representations of the virus, phenomenological issues in counseling, how to encourage people to go for counseling, for pre-testing counseling, for testing, for post-test counseling, and effective intervention strategies and related policy issues. We do not know what is the content of knowledge when people know about HIV AIDS. Our understanding of HIV AIDS is different, and understanding of ordinary people at the grassroots level is different. Sometimes they cannot distinguish between HIV and AIDS. Sometimes they think that HIV is a deadly infectious disease. Sometimes there is very strong stigma associated with that. So, we have to understand people's representations or people's understanding. In understanding people's understanding of something, we require qualitative methods. Now, as explained earlier, demographers are frequent users of statistical modeling and advanced statistical methods. They use latest versions of regression analysis. Somewhere I was reading that there was a time when a common sociologist, for whom you can use the term positivist, use chi-square or t-test or multiple regression analysis. Today, most common positivist sociologists would be using logistic regression, bivariate logistic or multivariate logistic odds ratios, Then sociologists are also using factor analysis, multidimensional scaling, factor analysis for reduction of data, and multidimensional scaling, which is in a way is the reverse of factor analysis. In factor analysis, we come from patterns to groups and or factors, and here in multidimensional scaling, we go back from factors to possible representations of different dimensions. In the recent times, however, there is a greater appreciation of qualitative methods also for the reasons I just mentioned. Today in population studies, as in other social sciences, qualitative methods such as participatory, rapid or relaxed appraisal, discourse analysis, narratives, these are terms for various types of qualitative methods. Case history methods, biographical methods are more in demand than the advanced statistical techniques. One reason may be that you may not require sound understanding of statistical methods if you have packages like SPSS or SAS, or there are mathematical packages, then you can analyze your data statistically without knowing mathematics of statistics. What you require is just interpretation of the findings. So, those without any understanding of simple algebra have also become statistical analysts. It has become simple, though I would say that if you are using statistical methods, then it is desirable to go deeper into the assumptions and limitations of the statistical methods that you are using, and mere reporting of findings of SPSS is not enough. Violation of assumptions of statistical techniques can lead to abuse of statistical methods. Importance of qualitative methods is derived from greater appreciation of multi-paradigmatic and shifting paradigmatic stances in various fields of social sciences, mathematical commitments, meta-theoretical commitments, and growing popularity of postmodernism. Mathematical commitment is required for quantitative sociology. It is meta-theoretical commitment. Here I mean that as I discussed in the first few lectures, that knowledge of sociologists and population scientists is very much paradigmatic. It matters a lot in analyzing social phenomena, whether you follow a functionalist approach or a Marxist approach or micro or phenomenological approach. In Marxist approach also there are so many approaches. So, that is the meaning of paradigmatic approach, or if you are a postmodern sociologist, then you follow an entirely different approach. In place of giving importance to universal knowledge paradigm, you tend to give more importance to advocacy of vulnerable groups. So, when the theory has become paradigmatic, and it is well accepted that yes, there are only versions of reality, there is not one essential universal reality which may be called grand narrative, then your perspective matters a lot in unearthing of so called reality, which can be of some use to some people. Growing popularity of postmodernism has particularly drawn people's attention to paradigmatic theories. So, there is a shift in focus. All this also implies a popular distrust of experts, that experts' knowledge is not the only form of knowledge or the real knowledge or more privileged knowledge or better knowledge. There is also importance of subjective and social representations. What do people think? What do groups, families, communities think? And empowerment. What kind of knowledge is required to empower people, so that they can attain their goals, values, wishes, despite resistance from society, social structure, other groups in society, and social representations. Social constructionists have diverted attention of researchers from exploring the causal connections to understanding of the knowledge which is taken for granted. This means that understanding of the knowledge which is taken for granted, like recently I was doing a survey of research on health problems in postmenopausal women. According to biomedical perspective, this is the time when women are suffering from certain biological deficiencies, and therefore, they using say Parsonian framework of sick role, they need to consult experts and go for certain types of medication, so that these deficiencies can be taken care of, or the bad consequences of these biological deficiencies do not affect their quality of life. Constructionists have shown that this is not always the case. In all cultures, women actually construct their problems, or their women construct the images of post menopausal situation, and in many cases, in many cultures or among many women, in reality post menopausal condition is the condition of liberation. It is not a disease. They do not see this as a disease. While doctors want to promote HRT for dealing with post menopausal complications, but there are ethical issues, there are issues connected with how do women themselves see problems before, during and after menopause, and if they welcome menopause, then no medication is required, and of course, there are always side effects of medications, and ultimately it is not the doctor, but patients or subjects or people who in consultation with doctor have to decide or must decide what course of action to follow. Now, there is a traditional divide in methodology. For a long time, sociologists favored one of the two approaches, statistical and qualitative, and took a rigid stand on the matter. I remember that when I joined IIT as a lecturer, at that time in sociology, this was a very live debate whether you are a positivist or you are a quantitative sociologist or you are a qualitative sociologist. A polarity between the quantitative and qualitative methods has emerged very clearly in the disciplines of sociology. No other discipline, in physics or in chemistry or in biology, they do not start with a chapter on methodology, but in sociology still in common textbooks you begin with some basic concepts and concepts in methodology. So, there is still a great divide in sociology and psychology also sometime between those who follow quantitative methods and those who follow qualitative methods. While a large number of researchers, for example, believe that meaningful research cannot be carried out without employing statistical tools, an equally strong number of researchers seem to be absolutely dissatisfied with this approach, means with the statistical approach. Historically, sociologists have always endeavored to bring sociology at par with social sciences, at least certain categories of sociologists like Comte, Durkheim. To some extent you can say that even Karl Marx was a positivist, reductionist, who wanted to understand social phenomena in a scientific perspective. This is true for both those who use methodological structuralism and those who use methodological individualism. These terms need some explanation. The term methodological structuralism means that society or social reality is an emergent reality of its own kind, and when you need to explain a social phenomenon, it must be related to structure of society. While methodological individualism would like to see social reality from the perspective of individuals, they will give more importance to individuals. Most of the time, the moment I utter the word sociology, it it's assumed, or it can be safely assumed that I am a structuralist. If I do not give importance to social structure, then I am not a sociologist. It applies to sociology of science, it applies to sociology of population, it applies to sociology of families, sociology of religion. In all sociologies, an attempt is made to explain things in terms of structures of society. Structures of society are taken to be a reality of its own type. While in methodological individualism, it is assumed that all social reality is product of decisions exercised by isolated and rational utilitarian individuals. So, that distinction we must make in distinguishing between different types of methodologies. However, for several years now, social scientists have been critical of such an approach and view it as a major source of narrowness in research. I mean, this distinction or this divide, people are trying to question this divide. A considered view would now be that no particular method is essential to social science research in all circumstances. You cannot take the position that for studying all kinds of social issues or for studying all kinds of demographic problems, one particular approach or one particular methodology, be it positivist or be it qualitative or phenomenological, will suffice. Which method should be used and whether several methods should be used in combination depends on the purpose and approach of the study. It may be argued that the differences between statistical methods and phenomenological methods are not on a continuum between extreme poles. They may be combined at various levels. These days, many people are talking of mixing methods, combining methods, mixing methods. Long back, Dangin in his studies of organizational psychology made a term very popular, and that was triangulation. Triangulation was a term drawn from civil engineering, which meant that in ships, when you see things, distant items from different vantage points, and then you try to learn from combining all those, all the images or all that you have seen, that is triangulation. So, likewise, Dangin said that social science is also in place of or whether quantitative methods are better or qualitative methods are better. What we need is a combination of methods. He went to the extent that even theoretical conflicts in social sciences are quite often futile. So, he argued in favor of combining theories, methodologies, techniques. I mean, long back I read an article on poverty in which it was argued that triangulation of theories can help us understand the issues connected with poverty better. Earlier, people were either trying to study poverty in positivist frame or in functional framework or in the conflict framework, Marxist framework. And Gams argued that there are some aspects of poverty which are better explained in modified functional framework of R.K. Merton, and Marxist theory of poverty is anyway very common. So, in that article I was mentioning that in some article I found an argument in favor of combining methods. The author said that it is better to look at different aspects of poverty in different frameworks. Maybe some aspects of poverty are better explained in the functional framework, while other aspects of poverty are better explained in Marxist framework. So, in place of insisting too much on frameworks, we must empirically or theoretically examine different aspects of poverty and thus use a mixture of different theory. Similarly, somebody can use a mixture of quantitative and qualitative methodologies or methods. In most of the empirical researches that I have done or I am still doing, donors expect us to combine both quantitative methods of survey as well as some qualitative methods of narratives, observations, case studies or interviews of key respondents. So, similarly, even in within the statistical methods, you can combine say different tests, t-test, chi-square, f. You need not depend only on one test. As a matter of fact, if you apply different tests, one of the two things will happen. All the tests will yield the same findings, or all your tests t, f, chi-square, z, this or that will yield significant results or insignificant results. That time it raises your confidence in your findings. And if you find that application of different techniques results in different findings, then this can raise a very new, a fresh question, why there are differences when you apply different techniques of statistical analysis. Same thing in qualitative study. If you find that your findings based on observations, based on narratives, based on case studies, based on focus group discussion, or based on participant observations are not same, it leads to a new question. Why is it? What is so typical about your pattern, your data, that you get different findings when different methods are used? So, it is always useful to combine methods, and in most of the empirical researches in the field of health, family welfare, reproductive health, or HIV or sexuality, these days population scientists or population researchers are combining both the method of survey and the method of observations or other qualitative methods. More on use of quantitative methods, the statistical methods are useful for a variety of purposes. So, having said that each methodology or each method has its own place in research, now let me specifically talk about quantitative methods. What do quantitative methods achieve? Statistical methods are useful for a variety of purposes. They are used for constructing scales. You cannot do any research without having proper measurements or constructing scales. How can you study say stigma against HIV/AIDS if you do not have a reliable and valid scale to measure stigma against HIV? Designing studies, you require quantitative methods for designing studies to decide about research designs, to decide about sample size, nature of sample, and also for describing data. You describe data through application of techniques like mean, variance, skewness, kurtosis, other or higher order moments or cumulants, and revealing dimensionality of data and predicting social phenomena. For prediction of social, you cannot predict social phenomena, especially the quantities, without applying quantitative methods. If you want to know what is going to be the population of India in 2050, how can you answer this question using only qualitative methods? They may also be combined with qualitative methodology, is a different issue. So, somebody can combine the two methods and say that our quantitative methods reveal that the population of India in 2050 is likely to be this, but our qualitative studies show that India at that time will be less integrated or more integrated, or there is likely to be more social conflict or more chaos or more normlessness or less. Traditionally, sociologists have always tried to be in line with the principles of natural science and have favored exact and standardized scientific methodology. They have considered quantitative methods as the only statistically valid and reliable methods of research. Using a deductive approach, quantitative research yields statistically reliable results. The process of quantitative research is best suited for testing hypotheses. In some books you will find that it is written that if the purpose is to generate hypothesis, then go for qualitative methods, or in exploratory studies go for qualitative methods. But if your research has matured to that level that you can generate some hypothesis which you need to test or falsify or corroborate on the basis of empirical data, then you have to go for quantitative methods. The obtained results are utilized for establishing causal relationships and making predictions. Quantitative methodology involves the following types of methodologies: descriptive or survey research, correlational and causal research, and experimental research. Descriptive research means describing a situation. So, through survey you can describe the situation, like if you conduct a youth survey, then you can generate lot of data on age composition, sex composition, marital status composition, religion, usual socio-demographic variables, and you can also learn a lot about their knowledge about family planning methods, knowledge about HIV and AIDS, knowledge about condom for protection of against risk of HIV. You can know a lot about say usage of various types of substances or drugs. You can know about in what situations they engage in risk behavior. The purpose is to describe. In correlational and causal research, the purpose is to establish a causal connection by applying correlational approach. This may be simple correlation, this may be canonical correlation between groups of variables, or this may be say path analysis or cluster analysis or some other more sophisticated approach to regression, or sometime you go for experimental research. The purpose of experimental research is to test whether an intervention shows the results or not. So, sometime before launching an intervention, you want to know what has been the situation before intervention and what has happened to something after your intervention is made. If there is a significant improvement in the situation, then you attribute that to experiment. Or sometimes you are interested in comparing two different types of situations, one in which an experiment exists, another in which experiment does not exist. So, like recently we did a study in which the purpose was to test whether certain interventions on the part of health planners to deal with the problem of postpartum hemorrhage is working or not. So, we have to select two areas, one may be called control area where intervention does not exist, and another area where intervention is made, and we will compare the situation. If the two areas are similar, identical with respect to other socio-economic conditions or all those variables which might influence maternal mortality ratio or PPH, then any difference between the two control areas and experimental areas must be attributed to intervention. So, quantitative methods are of these three types: descriptive or survey, correlational and causal. Correlations and causal analysis is also done on the basis of survey data, and then there is experimental research which is designed separately in the form of some control experimental or before and after type of research design. As late as in 2009, Cole and Gramezzo have used a statistical model to explain the causes of homicide rate in different cultures. It is interesting. So far, whenever we discuss something about quantitative methods in sociology, we referred back to one study of Emile Durkheim, and that was suicide. In that study, Durkheim computed suicide rate and compared it across different groups and communities, and compared it say between rural and urban areas, married and unmarried persons, and studied what happens to suicide rate as economically society progresses or regresses. Always we refer to suicide study. Now, in 2009, Cole and Gramezzo conducted a study of homicide rates, and they wanted to explain what actually causes homicide. Is it whether education, promoting education will increase homicide rate or reduce homicide rate, whether status of women will promote homicide rate or reduce homicide rate. And while Emile Durkheim used simple logic of multivariate regression, but simple comparative method for comparing suicide rates across cultures, social groups and time periods. Gramajo, Cole and Gramajo used a multivariate regression model to study causes of homicide rates. Some of his ideas are very interesting, and I would say that you must refer to his article which was published in Population and Development Review in 2009. Although not acknowledged by them, they have precisely used the same methodology as used by Durkheim in explaining suicide rate. The only difference is their use of logistic regression, which was of course not known to Durkheim. Positivists aware that scientific observation is the keystone of social scientific research. In absence of objective observation and definition, verifiability of research findings is jeopardized. Social scientific theories and concepts can be studied meaningfully only through standardized measurement procedures. You may say that some society is more corrupt than other society. Your statement or research will carry no weight if you are not able to develop a standardized method or a procedure or a scale or measure to define corruption. Objective observation and definition of social reality are very, very important. Therefore, it appears that social sciences cannot exist without objective measurement of variables. Such measurement provide the advantage of quantification of constructs and concepts, which in turn provides a basis for using statistical and mathematical tools of analysis. Imagine if in physics things like time, mass, velocity and distance were not measured so objectively and precisely, what would be the stage of development of physics? Physics cannot develop, science cannot develop unless you have scientific measure, objective, value neutral, objective, universal, precise measurements of time, velocity, mass. The same thing can be said about society. And somebody can say that the main reason why we do not have such an advanced science of society as we have science of nature or science of particles or what we call natural sciences. That is because sociologists have not been able to develop standardized measures for scientific communication. So, objectivity and quantification enhance communication within the scientific community. Subjective evaluations of findings are far more difficult to communicate as compared to results obtained through statistical analysis or standardized measures. Economy of time, money and scientific resources such as use of biomarkers in modern health research to measure factors like HIV status. First time in NFHS 3 we were able to use biomarkers in which random samples of blood were taken to estimate prevalence of HIV, and anemia was also measured. That is another reason that justifies the use of standardized statistical procedure. How can you examine prevalence of HIV or anemia by using qualitative methods alone? This is especially true when one has to study a large sample. Large samples cannot be studied through qualitative methods. Qualitative methods or method of field work was more suited to study of pre-literate or small tribal or village community. Qualitative methods of data collection such as in-depth interviews and participant observation might prove to be unwieldy and cumbersome in dealing with a large number of participants. Today when surveys are done, sometimes the size of sample of your survey may be 50,000, 1 lakh, 3 lakh. There have been surveys in which a number of countries of the world, several developed, several developing countries have participated, and the sample size can be as high as 1 lakh or 3 lakh or 10 lakh. So, their qualitative methods cannot work. Even if data is somehow collected from a large group at the expense of economy, it is rather difficult to handle the data without employing statistical procedures for a meaningful analysis. Even those who are using qualitative methods are using computer packages for sort of content analysis and statistical analysis of their narratives or their diaries, field notes. Scope of statistical method. Estimation of size of national and subnational population. This is obvious that in population studies, one of the first variable that we want to study is estimation of size, and statistical methods only can help in that. Then estimation of demographic rates and incidence and prevalence rates of various diseases, morbidity in studies of morbidity, occupational morbidity, hazards. Then causal analysis of concurrent and sequential variations in vulnerable to various types of risk. Causal analysis means what factors explain or what factors are the significant causes of something. The other day I was giving the example of sex determination test. Now, decision to go for sex determination may depend on a large number of factors, but it may depend on caste, class, family size, or nuclear joint family, tradition modern, rural urban or peri-urban areas, distance or proximity to PSC or health facilities, so many factors. All factors are not equally important. By using statistical methods, we can know which factors are the major causes of something, of our dependent variable. Operations research, in which one, this is another area of application of quantitative methods. Operations research, in which one wants to know whether a program has been effective in achieving the desired results, such as promoting safe sex practices, reducing stigma against HIV, and rehabilitation of people living with AIDS. And in descriptive studies of knowledge, attitude and practices of something like family planning, starting in 70s, what we call KAP or CAP surveys, they were the biggest users of statistical methods, knowledge, attitude and practices, CAP of family planning methods. Then rapid situation analysis and benchmarking for establishing some estimates, policy, some program can be implemented, you require statistical data. Quantitative survey research seems to be the best suited for obtaining hard facts and factual descriptive information, that is the keystone for most social scientific research. Qualitative research is not amenable to study important research issues such as measurement of attitudes in various domains, and for different purposes. Study of demographic patterns, behavior patterns pertaining to health and illness, evaluation of community intervention programs, religious beliefs and their causal influence on social behavior, etc., to mention only a few. Most research problems involve intricate relationships, direct, indirect, joint, then sometimes there are moderator variables, sometimes there are mediating variables, proximate determinants. Handling such relationships involves various complex formats and structures. Accordingly, simple regression model, path analytical model, factor, canonical, cluster and so on. TAG provides a comprehensive discussion of such structures and corresponding multivariate statistical techniques of analysis. The format of multivariate analysis techniques may involve convergent causal structure, interactive structure, spurious or indirect causality. Sometimes empirical results can be spurious, misleading or indirect. Discriminant structure, when the purpose is to distinguish between multivariate structures, canonical structure and latent structure among others. The complex reality of social scientific problems is thus dealt with to a great extent by multivariate techniques. I do not want to terrify you by using these sophisticated terms, and that is not the purpose of this course also. I just want to say that quantitative methods or statistical methods are important when the purpose is to explain complex phenomena. But there is a critique also. Some people who do not like quantitative method, they say that social scientists deal with complex phenomena. On the one hand, for some social scientists, the and statistical methods are particularly useful for studying complex phenomena. But qualitative sociologists say that social phenomena is so complex, and the meaning of the term complex is different in their statements. In the statements of quantitative sociologists, complexity means that a large number of variables are involved. There are a large number of interactions and relationships, but in qualitative sociology they say that social problems are complex in the sense that meanings of the issues involved, meanings of the constructs involved, or the meanings of events, meanings of facts, are so varied that they are complex, and one universal quantitative scientific approach to measure them or to analyze them would not be useful or much revealing about this complexity. Complex social reality is not amenable to quantitative approach. Therefore, one major criticism of the traditional statistical approach in social sciences is that it emphasizes objectivity at the cost of tampering with reality. In sciences also now the micro level at say atomic level or subatomic level, theory says that atoms behavior or particles, subatomic particles behavior is greatly influenced by the methodology that you use to study that. Same way, when you are studying social reality, you are also influencing social reality. This relationship between studying and influencing is more stressed by qualitative sociology. This lends support to qualitative methodology and qualitative methods. Qualitative methods, let us talk a little about qualitative methods now. Social scientists have produced a variety of qualitative methods. They include biographic theory, phenomenology or subjective meanings, meanings that individuals attach to something. It may be something like pain, it may be something like HIV, it may be something like migration, it may be something like family size, and then grounded theory, theories which grounded theory means theories which are developed on the basis of study of reality only, without any biases, without any hypothesis or any theoretical prejudice or theoretical guidance or direction. Ethnography, a method employed by anthropologists in early days, and case studies. Qualitative methods are particularly useful when the purpose is to explore new problems, when it is important to understand the people's perspectives, when one is dealing with unstructured issues, or when standard measurements will be misleading. We have often found in our researches that the meaning that we attach to something is very different from the meanings that people belonging to diverse sections of society attach. Meaning, our meaning of development in terms of per capita income or modernization or urbanization is different, and the meaning of development for a tribal, for a vulnerable section of society, or a meaning of a section of society which has been adversely affected by development would be different. So, the purpose of research should be to unearth or to understand these diverse meaning, and qualitative methods are more suited for this. In population research, one often confronts the additional problem of collecting reliable data which is of intimate and confidential nature, such as multi-partner sex. I have been part of district situation analysis and researches sponsored by UNICEF, researches dealing with HIV, in which some variables related to multi-partner sex were also included. Now, do you think that in a survey or in an interview, structured interview, if we are going to ask a rural woman whether she has sex with someone other than her husband? Is she going to answer your question? Even if she has sex with someone other than her husband, she will not accept it. So, multi-partner sex, this is just an example, this may be an extreme example, but in other cases also, perceivably simpler cases also, sometimes this may happen that you are dealing with intimate and confidential things, and the subjects may not like to reveal those things to you in your surveys or when you go with your structured interview schedule. Qualitative methods can help a lot in the initial phases in exploratory studies and often produce useful results to design quantitative studies. In general, qualitative methods have been used in the following types of studies: subjective meaning in reproductive decisions, religious and traditional rationality. What are various types of rationalities? Religious, rationality based on full calculation, rationality based on part calculation, or full information, half information, traditional rationality, religious rationality, ethical rationality. Rationality is not of one type. Why some couples who do not want additional child do not use contraceptive methods either in studies of unmet needs. Then community norms, including gender norms regarding sexual behavior and drug use. Qualitative methods have also been used in lived experiences of women kidnapped or tricked into being trafficked. In studies of sex work, trafficked women, and in social and cultural dimensions of diseases. Community responses to various risks, including the risk of HIV, sexual and drug use network, that can be done only by using participant observation or open-ended interviews or through key respondent or life history method. Then subjective understanding of needle exchange among drug users and phenomenological understanding of unsafe practices. When people know that some practices, most of the time those who indulge in unsafe practices know that they are indulging in unsafe practices. Then what is it that makes them to indulge in unsafe practices? That can be known by using qualitative methods. One of the most significant aspects of the qualitative research is that it enables researchers to use counter structural method, whereby they can verify if the subjects agree with their findings. Now, one student worked on the problem of NGOs with me, and he selected two NGOs. One NGO which started with some radical Marxist socialist ideology, and another NGO which was formed, registered, and started taking up developmental activities. Now, the student studies NGOs for a sufficiently long period of time and writes a thesis. Now, it is important to see whether what he writes about those NGOs is same as NGO's self perception. So, I asked the student to go back to those NGOs and share his findings of the study. It gave us a very good feedback. This is what counter structural method means: going back to the field, talking to the subject that these are what your findings are, and taking their feedback. Maybe in the light of their feedback you need to make some modification somewhere. This also enables the power gap between the research and the subjects, and de-emphasizes the distinction between expert knowledge and lay perception. Some researchers argue that as compared to exclusive use of one methodology or methods, it may often be very useful to mix them. Therefore, combination of qualitative and quantitative methods can be very fruitful, because statistical methods are often misused due to avoidance of assumptions, fallacious use of small samples for showbiz, deliberate concealment of facts, use of computing equipment, and lack of knowledge of appropriate technique. However, this is a charge which does not apply to quantitative sociologists only. Qualitative sociologists can also make mistakes, cook up their data, violate assumptions of the techniques that they are using. So, whether quantitative or qualitative, we trust scientists. We assume that scientists are objective and they are working on behalf of society. By doing research, they are serving the interests of the community or society. They are not doing research for their own sake. So, these charges which are often laid against quantitative methods, I would say that they are not so significant charges. They can equally apply to those who use qualitative methods, but combination is good. Now, operations researchers commonly advocate use of combining different methods such as questionnaires, interviews, checklists, content analysis. In one study of women faculty in IIT setup, we use the combination of questionnaire and interview. There are certain things which questionnaires can reveal better. There are certain things which interviews can reveal better. So, to study the various components of a complex phenomenon, they suggest collapsing the construct into its components, values, ideas, images, etc., and using different methods to study each component. Today, most practical researchers would favor methodological pluralism. Methodological pluralism means combination of different methodologies and methods. Combination of methods offers an opportunity for validating research findings and make it possible to gain required information using suitable methods. Recently, Robert Chambers and his colleagues have developed a new technique of research which is called participatory. So, accordingly, there are participatory methods. We will talk about participatory methods in a future lecture in the next class. These are some new methods in the kit of social scientists, and they help in seeing things from the people's perspective. At the end of the module on methods, we will focus on participatory method. So, what we have learned in today's lecture is that traditionally as sociologists as well as those working in the field of population have been divided along methodological lines, quantitative and qualitative. And quantitative sociologists thought that they are superior, they are doing scientific work and they are superior to those who are applying qualitative methods. Qualitative sociologists or population experts thought that this quantitative sociologist does not really understand things because he is not familiar with the meaning systems of people, of groups, of individuals, of communities and societies. But now it seems to make a sense to say that in real research, if you combine the two types of methodologies, you get better results. And let me tell you that in practical research, in operations research which is done for launching interventions or for testing success of intervention programs, for building development programs, community programs, programs to promote contraceptive use, or for reducing maternal mortality ratio or infant mortality rate or child mortality rate, or for educating people about various types of risk. Donors expect that you will be combining quantitative methods with qualitative methods. Quantitative methods will give you rates, ratios, incidence rates, prevalence rates and causal connection between socioeconomic and demographic factors on the one hand and study variables on the other, and qualitative approach or qualitative methods will tell you how do people at the grassroots level perceive their problems and perceive various intervention programs. Thank you.